You live and then you die, and you've only moved a couple meters.
Beloved are those that sit down. Welcome to the Space Turtle Show, the greatest show in the galaxy, and we're here again for Songs of the Second Floor.
Hey, we've been having some technical difficulties. Sorry about the everything being late, but we recorded this one and another episode all lost in the zeitgeist, guys. So, we're back here doing it again. We watched it a second time, so you know how dedicated we were. And yeah, this time we're gonna hopefully film as good of an episode as last time, hopefully better. I thought it was a pretty good episode last time, but no one will ever see it. So
Yeah, we got a good practice round. That's all it was. It's not like the footage corrupted or anything.
Yeah, nothing like that, man. We just, I don't know, drive too full, something.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I went first this season, and my choice was Songs from the Second Floor. And so this movie is just by Roy Anderson, and he went from making commercials to making this movie, and it kind of fits because it's a bunch of vignettes of people trying to connect based off of a poem that he's I forgot to look it up, part 2.
Yeah, we'll never get the poem, but they say it in the movie. That's all you need to know, right?
Yeah. And so it's just this bleak world that Anderson builds, and that tries to delve at the monotony of life and the breakdown of class and religion as well, and just everyday struggles of people trying to connect with each other and failing to do so sometimes and able to do so slightly in other times. So I thought it was a beautiful movie.
Yeah, I mean, it has a lot to love with it, and other than some pacing issues that I felt a lot more the second time around, like I love movies like this, and they're very great for watching, but when it's the second time in like 3 weeks, I'm like, wow, this does get a little slow, like, it's a little slow.
It definitely is slow, yeah.
But it has so much to offer in the writing and the acting and just the scenes that they get set up in, and as far as the technical aspects of the film, it's incredibly well made.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm a little opposite on that. I was like, I love rewatching films. I wouldn't say like immediately after. But
No, not films. Just this film.
Yeah, no.
This
yeah.
film.
Yeah, but even this film is what I'm saying, because I kind of liked knowing where it's headed after and being able to marinate in the scenes, and instead of my mind is easy to wander and be like, oh, what's gonna happen, what's like the main plot point, what's the twists or turns or things like that. So I actually really enjoyed this second watch, and I thought that there was a lot more depth in every scene that I could dissect a little more. And I thought the humor was, I wouldn't even say that I laughed more, because I definitely did not, but when I did, it's just so much more real. And instead of like, ooh, that's wacky, let's laugh, it was more like, oh man, that's like a real juxtaposition of situations and personalities that made me really enjoy the humor of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something about watching a film the second time where the first time I didn't know how funny it was going to be or how funny it was supposed to be until like later after I've seen the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like the second time where I know it's supposed to be funny, so now I feel comfortable laughing more. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So the jokes hit me a lot harder too, like just scenes that I knew were coming up. And that's one good thing about this film too, is it's got a lot of memorable scenes. Like every scene that happens, I'm like, oh yeah, this scene. This is the scene where this happened. Like the old guy, he says like his little thing, or like he's shaking on the crib.
Mm-hmm.
But like there are a bunch of scenes like that. They really stand out.
Mm-hmm. I actually think that it doesn't take itself that seriously, even though it is really absurd and surreal and bleak. And I think that really was one of the most impressive feats in the earlier portions of the film. I think sometimes it does drag a little bit at the later half, maybe like the third act, mostly because it does delve into more of like the religion and sacrificing the little girl and stuff like that, and it does begin to make more solid statements, which make the humor a little bit more uh, dark or not as joyous or as like chuckleable, if that's a word.
Chuckleable. I think that's a word.
Yeah, but for the first like more than half, I think that is a surprising aspect of Roy Anderson that I really love, and I think that is the peak of surrealism and absurdism that you can go to, is not to like push things so far that they are trying to say something so big, but to just push things just a tiny bit so that it is a little bit weird, but it's not necessarily drawing attention to itself. For example, one of my favorite scenes is the one where the dude from The Office, like the meeting room at the top of the like, you know, like CEOs and stuff like that. He's like shifting through all of his papers, and he's like, I put it somewhere, man. I put it somewhere. And then later, it's like him with a bunch of stacks of paper, and he's like, man, I can't find it. And his wife or partner or whatever was saying like, well, what was on it? And he was like, well, it just said that we couldn't do business anymore, you know? And to echo that with the previous, where they're in the meeting, the dude that was summarizing the whole thing was like, yeah, I agree with everyone. We just gotta hope, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's such a business analysis of business. You know, it's like you're just shuffling through all these papers and you're like, well, at the end of the day, we just kind of hope, you know? And then later on, he's like looking for the paper in like his bunch of stacks, and it's like, well, it essentially just said that we're gonna shut down.
Yeah, no, it's a very fun critique of capitalism. It's a very dark version of the world, an apocalyptic version of the world that is arguably not too different from what we're living in today, you know, which is the funny part and the sad part, and which is why this movie works so well in its message. So it's got a lot of scenes like that say a lot of different things at the same time, or maybe it's not saying different things, but it's saying one thing in a lot of different ways, and it's attacking an idea from a lot of different angles. And that's something I appreciated a lot with what Roy Anderson does as a director and with the writing itself. Like, he's very multifaceted, and he's got a lot of control over what's going on in a scene in a given time. You know, it's like he can use humor, he can use like deep, dark emotion, and it doesn't feel unnatural to switch between the two. And they're always both going on at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, not even to mention the little crystal ball that they all look at, like, and they pass around as he's trying to find the papers, you know, things like that. But I think, again, to reiterate, it's just the humor part that doesn't draw attention to itself that I really like with Roy Anderson, because he doesn't really have characters laugh or like push things to an extreme so much that it's like telling the audience to laugh. It's just like these little tiny things, you know, like if you were kind of like snoozing through the movie, you could just be like, oh, this is just a scene where this guy is like flipping through a lot of papers and he can't find it, you know? Then you look on the side and there's just like a bunch of businessmen just looking at a crystal ball and like passing it around. That's like the funny part, you know? And you were also talking about how it utilizes a lot of different layers to things, attacking things from different sides. And I think he also does that with the scene composition and the way that the camera is static, and yet there's so much happening in every like corner of every scene, you know, backgrounds and foregrounds and people talking and all that kind of stuff, you know.
No, yeah, totally. And I know it's something we talked a lot about in our practice version of the show is the set design and the way all of the scenes were put together, and the blocking especially. So I just want to have that little rant again here, because
we need to.
It's incredible. There's something to be said about I don't love, as a film watcher, I'm not a big fan of very gray, like gray
Color palettes.
atmospheres, like gray, dark gray, light gray. You know, a lot of movies do it, and it
It's like
always looks
Denis
bad
Villeneuve.
to me. It's like, it's very, it's just very boring, and even when it's meant to be boring, like it's not boring in an inventive way. It's just boring. But this is the one exception I have ever seen, and it does it so brilliantly. And I can't exactly put my foot on it, but just the way the atmosphere works with this set design and like little things, like I think of especially the scene with the homeless man and like the rats and all that.
The best scene.
Absolutely, like it's so
The
so
rat
good.
scurrying.
But just that kind of ambiance and atmosphere it gives, it's like it's not it feels thought of. It's like very well thought out, and it's very designed, and it looks like it I mean, it's not made for a lot of money, but it looks like it enhances the film.
Yeah, and I think it is a very what's it called, creative too, because we were talking during the movie about looking at the backgrounds, and especially during the moments where there's a lot of people, like when they sacrifice the girl, we're like, oh, wonder how many people are real, and like in landscape, like what portion of the landscape is real and not real CGI, maybe a green screen. And I did watch this video about Anderson, and he was showing us one of the shots from the movie, and it employs almost like everything that we could have thought of, or that we did thought of in that moment, like a little bit of green screen in the background, there's like the paintings in the forward, or like things that are pushed
Yeah.
to the forward, that so that they can cover, but in perspective wise it doesn't look like anything's different. And then built sets, and then like, you know, CGI non-built sets and that kind of stuff, and he just um it does look really gray and really plain, and the camera doesn't move. So I honestly think that the camera not moving gives a lot more um, power to the framing of things. You know, it almost gives me like a Wes Anderson versus Roy Anderson vibes. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
like if you watch how he shoots the scene, it's really constructed like Wes Anderson eventually does in his films like Grand Budapest Hotel, where they're going on a train, and it's like, you know, it's just like the front of the train when they're shooting, like and like built scenes like the Grand Budapest built like miniature, and it gives it that little quirky feel. He kind of does this too, even though it's not as stylized like that. It's not like quirky or everything like that, but it uses all aspects of perception and spacing to really paint a world without using too much money and building these huge sets and everything. And yet it still feels like every tiny thing too. If you're looking in the background, you can notice a lot of things, and everything is detailed, and you know, it was decided on, and like it was made with a purpose.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, I love it when filmmakers just use straight shots. I don't know, like I'm like a slut for it. It's like the best thing in the world when you just have a camera that points in a very singular direction, and then you get to play with it like it's a stage, you know, like you get to highlight blocking, and like actors' movements become very relevant when the camera's just standing still, and you can have like interesting interactions because you're on a singular vision, so you have to get creative with it, and they
Yeah.
do here. I mean, they've got, I think in particular the best blocking for me is the last scene where all the people are coming down through the grass, and it's very emotional for a lot of reasons. It's so metaphorical, you know. But just the way they come like rather slowly, and then they run away like kind of pathetically, and then they start coming back. And his block placement, the main character, like ish, pretty much the main character, and his getting put on the right while they're on the left as they're coming through. It just looks visually pleasing, and they have a lot of examples of that. I would say like the scene where they're all pulling their luggage is another example. Just stuff like that. It was where like the cinematography and the blocking, it looked very much like they were working well together and they were like communicating with each other, which is pretty rare.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think that I kind of wonder whether because it took him 4 years to make this movie.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder if he had written it all out or if it had kind of come to him in pieces. Because I feel like there's a flow to the movie that is not specifically focused on the main character, and yet like it still works miraculously. But I can totally see how he kind of started doing things and then it's like, oh well, there's this really interesting character, let me just like make him the main character, which pulls me into the conversation I really wanted to point out about I think the beauty of the beginning scenes and I would even say like the first act. I felt like what he was trying to do with the first act is to equalize people, or like to get the audience to view everybody in an what's it called? Inequality, I guess. And it starts off with, the worker, I guess. I don't even really know what the business is.
Yeah.
But
I don't know any of the characters' names.
yeah, I know
do.
Pele.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it does start with the bosses, but anyway, so that character gets fired, obviously, and he does this thing where he likes to have characters sit. And he does this later on in other movies too. But I really like it. And it can get old, but he has the character sit and he's like, yo, I just got fired. And he's just like, but he doesn't say that. He's just like, dead,
Yeah.
And then it cuts to a scene of the boss and he's just like kind of dead too. I guess not as dead, but his issue is like, he broke his golf club, And it's not like...
Yeah.
I mean, there is some criticism to it, but I think even more it's expounded on later on that the kind of issues that people have, like the feelings that people have, are always kind of the same. They just kind of shift whenever you have more money. Like you just get upset about different things,
Well, I would disagree with that a little bit. I would say it's more of a critique on the upper class for sure. Just how pathetic their kind of disappointment is and how stupid it is, really, because he does that a lot with like the rich and powerful in this film. Is like they're all pretty dumb and they're not very they're very emotionally immature, and it does this a lot, and it falls into like this kind of apocalyptic kind of atmosphere that they've got going on. For me is like which I think the writing does very well at the beginning, like in the first act, like you're saying. It, while doing what you were saying, it also just gets you an entire an idea for like the presence of the entire city in the world, and it makes it like, it makes you really feel like it's lived in, like you're one of the people in there and you're suffering like they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree. I think it also goes back to what we kind of talked about in other episodes, is like a critique versus like a condemnation. I think maybe...
well, I mean, I think it's a condemnation too. Like he's anti. This is a very anti-capitalist movie.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
It's like he's showing it pretty well.
Yeah, but the only thing that kind of shifts me away from that is like if you take those two scenes or that two cut betweens and take them singularly, then for sure I think that is like super condemning. But I think that he echoes that later on when he has the magician, and the magician like cuts the dude in half accidentally, not like fully, but he actually injures him, and then it goes to him like laying on his bed feeling really bad, and then it cuts to the magician sitting on his bed feeling really bad as well. And so either it could be more of like a condemnation and then like growing towards a more coming together of types of people. But I think
Well,
because
I would disagree. Like it definitely doesn't do that though. Like
what do you mean?
that's his whole thing. He's not trying to say that them bringing together. He's like definitively trying to bring them apart.
In
Like
what way?
in every way. That's like the whole point of the movie is that like these rich and powerful people and these business people, they don't know what they're doing, and they have a misunderstanding of the world that blinds them and makes the whole thing unequal and like terrible. To me, that's everything, and I'm pretty sure that's like what he's stated it's about too. I mean,
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just feel like the scope is a little larger, in my opinion. Like, I think that the movie is saying that the rich and powerful are blind and they're like running from the seat of their pants, and the only thing they have over other people is like money and power. But I also think that it says that like middle class people are like super dumb too, and they're flying by the seat of their pants as well. And even the poor people are like that, And so that's what I mean by the equalization. I'm not trying to say that like rich people are as sympathetic as like middle class or lower class people, but I'm just saying that like everyone in the world itself is really dark and desolate, and well, I wouldn't even say desolate, but like dark and like apocalyptic, because everybody is like has no idea what they're trying to do or wanting to do or how to do it correctly or how to communicate.
yeah, no, I mean he definitely, the whole town is fucked, but I think he clearly points the finger at the rich, and it's like that it's their fault because of all this stuff going on.
Yeah, that's true. I can agree with that. But I still think that like that goes back into my opening scene point of view, where it like contrasts two people and it kind of builds the world and the people in it a little bit more before it introduces the main character. And I always found that that was a good opening scene, because it does the work of building the world, which takes a lot. And you can tell from that by like other movies that have really lived in and aesthetic worlds, that you almost need to have like a little tour of the whole place to get into the feels. But I think he does it really quickly, and he kind of combines it with getting into the minds of the characters that live in this world, because they're not like exactly the same as people in real life.
No,
like,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
kind of like quirkier.
No, I it actually, now that you bring that up, it reminds me of it's like a slower version, and whether that's better or worse, but it's like a slower paced version of like the opening of Magnolia.
Oh,
The way
yeah.
it introduces everyone and then
Yeah.
it finishes off with the main character. And I really like what they do in this one too. I think it's brilliant the way that they set it up to like this main character with dust all over his face. Not to mention what a beautiful shot, and then like with all the people singing opera in the background. Like that's one of my favorite scenes too. Like, cuz why would you, like, nobody thinks to do that, cuz it's like kind of, it's weird, and it's out there, but it's like it's very artistically satisfying, and I can't even say exactly why, but it just is.
Mhm.
The way that everyone's singing like that, it's a great transition, and it's a great way to finish up the opening.
Yeah, I thought that was a great first act. And then to get into the main character, he's actually he's I kind of want to ask you this, if you thought that he was like upper lower middle class, or maybe like more on the poor end. I feel
I'd
like
say
that's
upper middle.
okay. That's interesting. Um,
What were you thinking?
I was thinking, well, I kind of like to debate about it, because I was thinking upper too, because he has that like little bit of privilege, and he has that like saying that he says to his son. He's like, if you talk, like if you just say things, like people will give you what you want. When he's
Yeah.
talking about the insurance company, he's like, yeah, I just kept talking to them, and eventually they relented. And I'm like, that's such a upper middle class slash like almost rich type thing.
Yeah.
Or even his quote that like he's just trying to put food on the table and enjoy himself a little bit, or his pitying of himself.
Yeah, well, and he also, I mean, he owns a business, so that's
true.
pretty.
But he
That's
burns it
definitely-
down.
Yeah, I mean, he burns it, but like, yeah, he burns it down, but he definitely gets the insurance money. So
That's true. I was just thinking more on the lines of his traveling methods, because I was almost looking at things. Maybe it was more of a dichotomy than like a triple thing, but I was thinking like, okay, well, the people who are rich fly, and they're able to like get out of everywhere by just taking the easiest route, the least crowded route, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the middle class, which is like the roads and the cars, and that's why like everyone's trying to better themselves in such a full or like overpopulated like portion of people. That's why they can't go anywhere. And then I was almost thinking like maybe the subway would be like for poorer people, and that's how they're able to actually get around. Because the lady in the first scene or the second scene when you're introduced to the guy that burned his business down, she's like, bro, I've been here for like 4 hours, man, I haven't moved anywhere, can you come and get me or something?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that makes so much sense as like maybe poor people are able to like shift between places really often, but that doesn't mean they're able to like move up. But maybe it was more like a dichotomy than a triple, because I was trying to like tie it in with
I don't know, honestly. Like I'd believe that if you told me that, like you heard it from Roy Anderson, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know for sure, but it seems believable. And
that's the best you can ask for when you're throwing out a theory.
Yeah,
it seems
yeah,
believable.
Totally. I mean, they've got a lot of that. That's the thing about this film too, is it's like it's got so much going on that like you're looking for something in everything, because you know how well planned out it is and how good the writing is, that there's always something extra going on with all these great films that we talk about. There's always another thing going on. It's like if you take films at face value, you're definitely going to hate this movie. But like in general with film, if you don't think that something else is going on, you're wrong, because something is always going on. And in this film more so than almost any other, because it's got so many layers and so many ideas that it's trying to say, as well as telling jokes along. Well, it doesn't really. No one even says jokes
like
per se.
humor.
Very situational.
Yeah.
Or like certain lines though that are, I guess you're more. Because some like with American comedies, right? Comedians will like say things and it's more like you're laughing with them because you're in on the joke with them because it's so stupid. But these guys, you're like laughing at them, like you're like, that's so stupid. Like my son, he learned poetry and now he wants to die. Like that's so funny that he would think that's why. And also he's kind of true. And also it's just such a funny situation, or like stuff like that. It's like I could go for ages about the writing. It's like it's so incredible on so many levels.
The little bits of absurdism in the humor as well is when you're talking about how I guess the dad or the main character was like he read, or he's writing some poetry, or he read some poetry and now he won't talk or is depressed or wants to kill himself, or whichever one of those that he was saying. But I think that the fact that it was so funny is so telling of what it actually, or how hilarious it actually is in real life. When people, they don't specifically say, oh, my son, like he started writing some poetry, now he's depressed. Obviously that would get them laughed at. But maybe earlier, maybe not like during our time, but like a little earlier, they're like, parents would be like, oh, my child went to college, or like they got an education, now they're depressed, or they learn about the world and now they're depressed, or something like that. And like those seem more convoluted of like evidence or whatever, or they read too much or they watch too many movies. Like my parents always say like, oh, don't watch too many depressing movies, it's gonna make you depressed, or like horror movies because it's gonna like get you haunted or something like that. But just simplifying that statement to the core idea and then presenting that, and apparently it's funny because it is, but also it's revelation. Like it's a revelation that, to me at least, that this is actually kind of what people actually say. They just don't say it as like straight as that, you know?
No, totally. And it's like, it's funny because you're laughing at the guy saying it because it's like, yes, that's true, but why is he being why do you learn poetry and then become depressed?
Yeah.
It's because you learn about how fucked up everything is and how
Yeah.
fucked up the world is and how meaningless you can feel and your existence and all of that. And understanding the world on that level is very soul crushing in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of laughing at this guy's like willful ignorance, like that he doesn't understand that fact. And in a way, like you're laughing, but in another way, it's like, well, that's really intelligent, you know? I mean, and the best humor is intelligence.
Yeah.
Like, in my opinion, I don't know. Like, actually, no. Well, I mean, I'm pretty dumb. Like, I love a good, stupid, whatever. There's a lot of great types of humor, but as far as writing goes, it's like this is very intelligent humor because it says so much about the world while also being very funny, and it's like it's observational, you know? It's like they've got observational and situational, and that's pretty much the dichotomy of humor in this one because he says all of those things, but at the same time, like if you look at the situation, then next to him there's a patient that's in a doctor's suit, and then he gets like stripped of the doctor's suit by a real doctor like halfway through, and it's like, give that back, what are you doing? You know, like stuff like that. I don't know, like it's just hard to think of filmmakers that do that.
Yeah, it's so him, you know? Like Roy Anderson has this specific type of humor, and I think that him being bold enough to almost, you know, there's no laugh track, there's no laughing, everything is presented like so straight and stone cold that it's almost like he is 100% sure we're gonna laugh, even though you can't always be 100% sure. But being so confident, it like makes us like respect that, and then it makes it funny because we're like, respect, you know, you just did that weird thing like on the side for no reason, really.
Yeah, and you know, it's like it's one thing to bring up too that, you know, this movie is not going to be for everyone.
Yeah.
At all. You know, it's
very for me.
Very slow. The humor is very weird and it's unorthodox, and it's it goes all over the place, but it's also very tight writing wise. But I can understand how people would say it's all over the place. And it has all of it has all the things that make it like, I understand why it's only a free video on YouTube with 8,000 views. Like,
it needs
also,
more.
First
Guys,
of all, I can't
give it some more.
I can't believe the first episode we're doing is on a movie that's only on YouTube for free for 8,000 views.
I could not find it anywhere.
But anyway, I love it almost because of that, and I love it despite that. You know, and I think it's what makes it so special too.
Yeah, and I think that means it's free. It's mostly okay quality. I mean, I've never seen it like as a DVD or Blu-ray, so I don't have no contrast, but there's no excuse not to watch it before you watch this, guys.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's free out there.
Don't mind me. I'm just going to
plug in his computer, bro. It's about to die.
That would be a real fucking shame if my computer died on the second try.
But I don't know. Do you want me to pause right now so
No,
we can
no,
cut
no,
it out?
no,
Okay.
No. This is a little behind the scenes.
Yeah, you guys get to see all the struggles we go through, man. So many struggles.
We are technologically poor.
Inept. Yes.
And inept.
Yeah. And so what I was trying to say before was that there is actually like intelligent humor and non-intelligent humor. So you brought up that example, and I think that contrasts so well the almost like the right side of the screen and then the left side of the screen. You know, he's not too heavy on practically anything in this movie, but even the humor, he's not too heavy on really deep jokes of meta and criticism and commentary. Like that doctor came out and even on the second watch, that's totally convincing, man. He like comes out, he pulls out his thing, he's like writing down, he's looking super professional. That psych,
No, dude.
that guy was playing his part, man.
And like one thing to add real quick before you
Uh-huh.
keep going, like watching it the second time, I had my eye fixed on that doctor because I was like, what is it? Like, because like they say like the old like the father yells a bunch and then the guy just looks down and he like flips his papers a little
Yeah.
bit and I'm like, that's so funny. That's just like some dude. He's like, what would a doctor do in this situation?
Right, he's committed. He's good at acting, man.
Yeah.
And then they just come in and just take him from him. It's like, damn. And they're rough about it too. They're like,
Oh yeah.
bend over, get up. But to continue with that scene, though, awesome scene, so much to talk about. I want to bring up the fact that in every single scene of the psych ward, it's hilarious how the one that gets overblown and erratic and almost dangerous to, well, I guess maybe not dangerous, but almost up there, and gets pulled away is always the dad. And it's kind
So
of
great.
hilarious, yeah, because it's like, seems like a crazy person, like everyone seems so nice in the psych ward, and the one person that always gets dragged away kicking and screaming is the dad.
It's so funny.
Even his other like psych ward mates or whatever, like there's this one guy just talking about how Jesus was a kind man, which is interesting commentary. And again, there's the stupid humor. I can't even say it's stupid, it's beyond intelligent that my brain thinks it's stupid. But when the dad was talking about his business idea, or his new business venture or whatever, one of his psych wards like, I've also got a new business idea. And they look at him and he's like, but I'm not gonna tell you. And I'm just, that got me dying the second watch. I'm
Yeah.
like, what was the point of that? Like, I couldn't think of a single reason why that was written in this script, like, other than being hilarious.
Yeah,
of
my
course, but-
my favorite thing with like film in general is like humor that is so like intelligently stupid that like you have to think really hard to make it that dumb, so it's
Yeah.
like it's dumb but like like a respectful dumb, right? Like
It's like you got to be
like
self-aware.
all
dumb,
all the comedy and everything everywhere all at once like is like that kind of dumb.
Yeah.
It's really smart levels of dumb.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what I was trying to say before, or when we cut off a little bit. It was just that there was actually like stupid and intelligent humor, and I think that is a great contrast and a great mastery that kept you on your toes, because you're like, oh, what are they gonna say? Something absolutely atrocious next, or like something that you have to like think about, and that really makes me rack my head throughout the whole film. And I think that's the best thing for me, in my opinion, about a film, is if I can just think about so many things while things are going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's just to go back to the scene. If we're just dissecting the whole
Yes.
movie with this one scene,
One
really,
scene.
because it's a good example of like a lot of things that happen.
Yeah.
And another one is that it has two things going on at the same time, and it gives its direct attention to both of those things at the same time, which is something that is never usually seen before in film and in like normal cinema. Like
Yeah.
usually people are talking in a scene and then maybe something's going on behind them, right? But the characters stop like talking about important stuff, or like there's something's going on, and they kind of take a break from the emotion that's going on. They look at the thing. But in this movie, they often have two things going on at once, and you have to kind of bounce between both of them because it doesn't slow down to let you watch the other thing.
Mhm.
And I love that about the writing in this and the way it was put together, because it's very unique, and it's stylistically pleasing, and like it keeps me on my toes as someone with ADHD. It's like, oh boy, two things, like this is great. And it does that in so many occasions, and in this case it's the patient's being found out that he's like
Yeah.
while they're talking
Yeah.
about poetry, and I just love stuff like that in this film, and it does that a lot, and stylistically, like if we're gonna go into this scene. Like, it's a very good metric for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and I think that it just works with the whole theme and style of Roy Anderson, and it's really refreshing. First of all, as like a scene that, or for the whole movie, because there's not a scene that isn't like that. That it isn't like, shot reverse shot, or like foreground focus, like background blurry, or like out of focus. It really lets the world be like a real world where other people are doing things. You can't pay attention to everything at once. Other people have important conversations as well. Like, you can pick and choose what you want to focus on. Everyone has a story. A lot of things are going on.
Yes, that is I thought that in but like not in words, but like my brain was like, something special about this, but you just put it into words.
Nice. That's what the discussion is here for, man.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that totally works with his theme and with his directing style and like his aesthetic. I could totally see it being like utilized in a bad way, so I wouldn't go and be like, hey, everyone, you should do this. But I just think everything just fit really perfectly in this film with his really expansive, I guess, directing style and like writing style, to have everyone have their own unique conversations and interesting thoughts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it gives love to everyone, which is another big thing about the film, and something we can go back to talking about the writing and the opening scene going through the entire town. Is like, this movie and a lot of great movies like it, they give an entire world to every character, and it really feels like everyone's got their own thoughts and feelings and emotions and drive, and it gives them a lot of character development in very little time, which is very, it's something that enhances everyone, because it makes the entire experience more realistic and interesting, because you're standing behind characters that, even if they have not very much screen time, you understand them better than a lot of other films would do. Like old 100-year-old man in the crib. Like, I got it, man. Like, he didn't even like say very many words, and when he did, like, they didn't make any sense. But like, stuff like that, the way that he's used and people talk to him, or like just little scenes like that, is like, this is another character in this vast city, and he's very developed and he's very interesting, and it was an excuse for me to bring up the old man in the crib, because I just fucking love that guy. He's the best, man. He's so funny, and he's like, I don't know what to think about him. He's like, the way he just like jiggles the cage so pathetically.
I love that they had that scene for him. Like, you did not, like, again, what does it do? Like, there's no one else in the room. It just cuts to him, and he's just like,
it's the best. He told me, like, literally just by doing that little jiggle, I'm like, all right, I know this guy. Like, I know everything I need to know.
Yeah, and I think bouncing on with your ADHD type, like, focusing on two things, it almost does that a little bit different for me, in the way that it introduces a lot of characters sometimes and only gives them a little screen time. It makes it, what are the most relatable characters? The one that you can paint your own story of them, in my opinion. And I think that one of the best examples of that is the main character's youngest son, the taxi driver. Mm-hmm. And he's like, drunk and walking home, and he meets the homeless man, and the homeless man is like, yo, Suzanne, like, like, why are you like doing this guy here? And then, the whole story of the homeless man. But also, I was kind of thinking the interesting thing about the Suzanne and the guy that she's with now, and he keeps looking over, and he's like, who's that? Like, who's calling you, and like things like that. And for me, I don't know if this is any remotely true or anything at all, but I like to like headcanon things. So I'm like, oh, okay, so like I think Suzanne was kind of like almost flirting or cheating, or fully cheating or not cheating with that new guy while she was with the other with the son. And then now, like, he's like, oh, I'm the one that stole her away. he's hearing someone else like outside, and he's like, oh, have you been talking to other people? Like, who else knows you? Like, who else is having feelings with you now? So he's just kind of, and she's like, no, it's nobody, I promise. I'm not like talking to, like, I don't know who that is, you know? And he's like, I don't know, man. You were talking to me while you were talking to him, man. You could be talking to someone else while you were talking to me, you know? And that's just, you know, of course, it really has no evidence in the film, but I I just like that it has these conversations that you aren't fully shown the backstory of, but it's not like background character dialogue, you know? It
Yeah.
has like nuance, and it has like subtext in their conversation. We just never know what the subtext is, or like.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it reminds me of another version of that's a lot more obvious and like
Okay.
way funnier
Uh-huh.
than that one, which is like a more serious example of that
In
does
this
a good
film or a
job
different
of
one?
in this film.
Okay.
It's the nurse and the doctor every time
Oh,
they talk,
yeah.
and she's like, when are we gonna talk about, are you getting a divorce?
Yeah.
Like, and she's like so serious about it, and the doctor's just reading his paper, and he's
He
like,
eats a sandwich.
you know. And it's so funny because they cut to it like every time they're together, and then someone comes into the doctor.
Yeah.
Obviously they do it like 3 times. It's
Yeah.
like, comedy's version of like, you do it another time, it's not funny, but you do it a third time, it's funny again. And it definitely, like, that's an example of like the way they do it comedically. But I like what you're saying, because he does it on a lot of different levels. Like we say, like, he's always doing something on different levels. He likes to do some serious stuff, some funny stuff, and then he'll do both at the same time. He'll do,
Yeah.
And he's always got that dichotomy there.
And I think that for me personally is what makes this film so like engaging, because although nothing really happens, there are a lot of ideas and throwaway lines that are constantly happening, and so they always catch me off guard, even if I know like what's gonna happen in the movie. Like I don't remember every line, you know, and so they still catch me off guard, like when they're gonna be humorous, when they're not gonna be humorous. And I think that if I were to dive into at least one criticism, because I really like the film, I know you thought it was slow. I don't know if you have any other criticisms, but I guess the singular criticism I have would, it's kind of half and half, because it would kind of break his. Yeah, no, I guess it would break his aesthetic, but I think it would be for the better. There's like no diversity in the cast, and so it really
That's true.
does paint, like, I know they kind of put white on their face. I know it's to make them look pale and deathly, but also it's like, and I wouldn't see how that would work if he added people of color in the film. But one of the ones that he does have, he doesn't really obviously make it so, and so I'm kind of not person of color, but just like foreign people. The guy that gets beat up, I was just curious, and I was looking through the IMDb and the cast and everything like that, and the guy that gets beat up after he tries to find someone, and he gets like kicked out or whatever, he's actually an immigrant, and
Yeah.
it labels him as like immigrant. You knew that from the movie?
No, not from
Oh,
the
okay.
movie, but I saw
You
it. I
also-
saw it as a fact.
Oh, okay,
I was
cool.
reading like a review of it or something. and I was
Okay,
like,
yeah.
oh, an immigrant, because like that made no sense to
Yeah.
me when I watched it, because I don't know, he was speaking their language,
Yeah.
and like, or
Well, besides
I mean,
the German kid.
maybe it was what?
Maybe it wasn't their language. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know Swedish
Now that
at
you're
all.
thinking it's not, might not be, now it's putting doubt on me, because as a person who's not well versed in many languages, it sounded like similar language.
Yeah.
And like the whole fact is that he got beat up, and that makes so much more sense now that we know like he's an immigrant. That's a lot more of what he was trying to say about, like, just again the absurdism. It just, I don't even know if that's the right word, but he just gets beat up for no reason, and it's tragic in that, but it's kind of the exact same thing in the real world, but it's just painted in like a different light.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he's definitely it's a very monochromatic cast.
Yeah.
That's
To be fair though, I don't know how, like, it is budget. I mean, I guess yeah, you could hire someone, but like
Sweden's definitely
not,
very white,
yeah.
but also like I guess you could have been more like timely with, you could have casted like someone from the Middle East as an immigrant or something that was going on in Sweden at the time.
Yeah.
I could say that would be like a little better there, because Sweden is not very good with immigrants in general.
Yeah.
Like people raise those countries up like they're these unique socialists, like
Yeah.
paradises, but like they have a lot of racism too. They just don't experience it as much as some other countries. But when immigrants do want to come to those places, they definitely don't like that, historically.
Yeah.
As with every European country and America and
Yeah.
most places.
Yeah.
I
Most every
guess.
country, really.
Unfortunately. But yeah, I don't have much more criticisms other than that, though. Like,
Okay.
the pace felt very slow to me this time around because I'd seen it again so recently,
Mhm.
and it was slow before the first time I watched it. But it's not like I don't make it as a huge criticism, the pacing, because the first time I watched it, I felt like it was a very good pacing, even though it was slow.
Mhm.
It just felt right. I don't really know how to say it. Sometimes
agree.
with pacing, it just feels right or it doesn't.
Mhm.
And this second time around, it was slow as balls. But like I watched it so recently, and I've been very tired because we've been traveling around a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I give it a pass because like I was so tired. So,
Mhm.
not many criticisms other than that, though. This film is great. Like, it's truly great.
So right before our final thoughts, I want to highlight a bunch of scenes, and during the first run around we almost dissected the entire movie scene by scene because we were just so wanting to laugh. We're just like, remember this part, and I want to at least touch on some of those before we end because I think they deserve a lot.
Totally. It's just, it can get demoralizing when you look at every single scene and then you lose all the fun.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, we already talked about every scene,
Yeah, that definitely hinders our. But
Totally.
we went more philosophical route.
Yeah,
a little more analysis in
It's
in
a
this
good episode, I
than
think.
last episode. Yeah. But one of the first ones I want to talk about is this self-flagellation in the background.
Oh my gosh,
of the scenes.
Totally.
I mean, even in the beginning, right when the immigrant gets attacked, there are people in the background. There's like that whole commentary on like people are just watching him get beat up, but
Yeah.
there's also the people pushing the car off, and I'm still kind of confused about it. Maybe they're trying to start it by getting it going or something.
Yeah.
But the background's always interesting, is my point. And one of the most interesting things about the background is the business people either whipping themselves, whipping the one in front of them, or like both, one of the two. But I think that is one of the most hilarious background scenes that I've ever seen, for real.
Oh, it's so good. Like, we don't have to talk. I don't have to talk about it too much because you already said, like, I mean, it's amazing. You know what? It's so weird that it's there and it's like so random, but it makes sense like thematically with the film, and it's so outrageous. It's just, I mean, it's so funny and it's so good.
And I think that one of the things I wanted to talk about with that scene is maybe that, there's this I guess what's it called, responsibility with changing things that's really put on like the middle class, and I feel like that kind of is shown in the people that flagellate themselves or others. It's like the middle class going to work, and they're supposed to like do things. I think this was most highlighted whenever the main character was talking to the insurance people, and he like points to these people. He's like, look at these people, man. They're like doing something. They're like trying their best. They're like working hard, like trying to change things. Like, what are you guys doing, like hassling over whether this chair is like a fancy chair or not a fancy chair, and that whole responsibility that's put on like the middle class to like further the world or like change things, when the rich people just like do whatever they want, and have no consequences, and even have no responsibility, I guess. I mean, I I know nowadays we put a little bit more responsibility on like rich people, but definitely a
Totally.
lot on like everyday people to try and change the world, even though they have like almost the least amount of power to do so.
Yeah, it's a real plastic straws versus corporations
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Like whole industries and stuff. But
Hmm.
anyways, another scene I thought was hilarious is the cut between the scene we heavily focused on. This is right when he was in the psych ward and he's sitting down and everything, and they talk about the beloved are those who sit down, and then they cut to the church, which is hilarious because he
Yeah.
goes to church afterwards, and then he's trying to like tell about his problems, which is a character trait, flaw, quote unquote, but a trait of the main character where he just kind of wants to talk about his like problems and his like pain and his a lot of self pity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then he tries to do that at the church, and then he's like, well, I mean, everybody, like the priest is like, oh, well, everybody. I mean, I can't sell my house, man. And I'm like,
Yeah, no, that was such a good one. Like the priest just saying something like that. That's just not what I expected a priest to say, and it's exactly what felt right in that scenario. And it's a good commentary on like what capitalism has done to religion and like the way the world kind of revolves around money now even more than it did.
Yeah.
As opposed to
keeps
like
getting more
different
yeah.
commodities and spirituality and all of that. And it was a good, funny way to dissect those things.
And I think that scene is actually pretty powerful too, because before on the psych thing, it's like he's like, yo, why aren't you talking to me, blah blah blah. He gets dragged out, and the younger son empathizes with the older son, and he's like, beloved are those who sit down. And then the dad eventually goes to the church to try and get some sympathy, and then the priest is like, yo, I can't sell my house. And then the helper or assistant or whatever, he's like, well, I planned a vacation and they went bankrupt and I lost all my money. And then eventually he says, beloved are those who sit down. And I'm like, maybe there's a little growth, maybe there's a small bit of change in the dad's that's going on, and that's like the first of it. And it's like in this world of everybody's like struggling, the best you can do is like kind of like empathize, but in a way that is a lot more interesting, or a lot more interesting in today's time than before, with like the Beatitudes and stuff like that. It's like, blessed are those who are poor, blessed are those who are weak in spirit and stuff like that. It's like a philosophy of having not having a lot of power, and so you have to like kind of accept that and feel blessed. And now people have like some power, not like everyone's rich and everyone can change the world or anything. We have some power, but it's still lonely and it's still painful and it's still a difficult life, and so beloved are those who sit down, beloved are those who, I can't remember what they say, but they say a lot of like, getting stuck, like they get their fingers stuck and everything, like
What?
how could that
Hey,
be?
that happens to everyone. Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful line, and it's a beautiful poem, and I think I'll remember that line for at least the next 10 years. I don't know about the rest of my life. I'm pretty forgetful, but like, beloved are those that sit down is just a line that will resonate with me, and something I'll probably think about and quote in my head a lot. I might not say it out loud a lot.
Yeah.
Because it might be kind of cringe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember his last name, Vallejo. And so that credits to that dude's poem. And then I think it also kind of shows like and then like in the next funny scene is the one where he gets his like finger stuck, or one of the passengers or something like that. I thought that was a hilarious scene. He's just like, and everyone's just like gathered around.
Yeah.
And that introduces a character that we needed to talk about, which is Sven. And I just love the juxtaposition of like him killing himself, and there's just like blood on his, and then the main character holding the cross, which is like, and that kind of is showing the dichotomy, but the equality of life and struggles from the past and now, you know. Same thing with the Beatitudes with the poem. It's like people got crucified before because they're kind, and then now people, I can't say for sure that Sven was kind or whatever, but he did lend the money to that dude, and then he killed himself. And so like, and that like visual connection between the two, and I guess that makes the cross scene a hilarious one to mention. I thought that was one of the funniest jokes the first time around, was when he couldn't find the nail to to hang Jesus on. But I don't know why it was so violently, or it wasn't even violently, but it just felt so like harshly. They just dropped Jesus, and then Jesus just swinging around for like a straight minute.
Yeah.
Like, he would not stop swinging back and forth.
It was so funny. Like all the stuff they do with the crosses and that whole like kind of thing, it's pretty hilarious. And like, and they defile the cross like all the time in such like the ending scene where the guy just drives over all the crosses. It's like, fuck these crosses. I thought this would be a better business venture, you know. Yeah, it does so many funny things like that.
And I think I want to bring up one more, and I think you might want to. I feel like one of your favorite funny scenes was like the sacrifice scene, so maybe you want to talk about that. But before that, I feel like there was a thematic moment with the child in the room with all the adults too. One of the things the lady or the teacher or whoever brought up was like, whenever you're little, you don't know a lot of stuff, and whenever you're old, you know a lot of stuff, you read a lot of things, and you know what's impossible and what's not impossible, you know. And then she first talks about how, you know, an ant can't eat an elephant. And then she moves on to an example that you can't invite everyone to your birthday party because everyone will get such a tiny small piece of cake that it won't mean anything, or it would be nothing. And I think that's such a interesting, I guess maybe like logical fallacy, or I don't know exactly what type of argument or evidence that is, but to transition from that to the other one, I didn't even notice it the first time. I was like, yeah, I guess. And she's like talking about impossible things. But then I thought about it. I'm like, isn't that such an interesting political kind of argument, like that goes around a lot? Is that like you can't give everyone everything because quote unquote blah blah blah, you know?
No, it's definitely it's another one of those anti-capitalism.
Yeah,
little tidbits he throws in there.
I really like that. And other than you know, them getting the rocks already and then sacrificing, I thought there were some funny moments in the sacrificing too.
I mean,
you liked it a lot.
Well, I mean, I think it's funny. Like, it's very absurd and dark. Obviously, they sacrifice a little girl, but you know, it's so funny the way they do it with like the rope on like the woman, and then just like the little push and just like
it is so hard.
And like testing it beforehand and all of that stuff.
It's a ritual.
Yeah, and it's so absurd and stupid, and like the fact that they think that would help, and just everything going around that is hilarious. And also because it's so dark, it makes it funnier too.
Yeah. I think like specifically that earlier he says, well, earlier the office scene, they're like, oh, I guess we just have to hope. And then in the next kind of connecting scene, it's like he's like, oh, the paper will say that we have to shut down, and everybody there's no hope in this business or whatever. It's impossible. And then they go on to talk about when you're older, you know what's impossible and what's not impossible. So in the face of impossibility, they're like, just sacrifice a kid. Yeah. Like, I don't know what else to do, man. I'm old and I'm wise and I know everything and I know what's impossible. This is impossible. So let me just sacrifice a kid. Maybe it'll help.
We sacrifice the blood of youth.
Yeah.
What more can we do?
And gets super drunk where he just like projectile vomits on the table.
So good. Yeah. I mean, that's all the stuff I can really think of.
Yeah. I think the last thing I want to ask is if you had any like kind of like theories on what the ending scene kind of meant, or like what kind of or what the ending or any opinions on the ending scene, whether it was like good, bad, left things ambiguous, not ambiguous.
Well, I mean, I don't think it was super ambiguous. and I felt like it's one of my favorite scenes. Really, like I said, with the blocking and everything, it's some of my favorite like
So everybody gets
visual work. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that it's like the ghosts of this guy's past and like the regrets and guilt that he's been pushing back all his life is slowly kind of oozing into his conscious, and it's a very revelation. I don't know what the verb is for that, but it's like a very
realization.
yeah, it's a really good realization for the character, and like his it encapsulates his character growth as he slowly starts to realize what's his life is and what it is becoming. And I think his face really says it all. Like, it's the best acting in the entire film, I think, is his face at the last scene, at the last moment. It really gives a lot of, you know, like his understanding of what he is and what he's done, and maybe not what he needs to do, but like understanding his situation. He doesn't fully understand the situation, maybe ever, but definitely he understands it more at the end than he ever has before.
And I kind of echo that. I feel like there is this beautiful and subtle growth of the character as he kind of recognizes that beloved are people who sit down. I obviously don't think he's like changed a new leaf or anything like that, but following those scenes, he kind of like sees Sven, and then he sees the little German kid, and that kid keeps kind of following him around. And I think, in my opinion, I feel like his empathy is starting to evolve a little bit more. It's like, why is this random German kid keep following me? It's because, well, in my opinion, it's because like he's starting to actually empathize with people who he hasn't met, he hasn't done things to, and at the very end, the little girl too shows up, and so I don't know whether good or bad that he has all these quote unquote ghosts or things that are following him, but at the very least, he gets really mad at Sven at the very end because I think that he is confused about why he shows up again. Because the last time he talked to him, he was like, yeah, you know, he's kind of confessing everything. He's like, you know, I was a little bit relieved when you died, and I'm sorry about that, and stuff like that. I can't pay you back now because you're dead and you have no relatives. But then at the end, he's like, why are you back? Like, it's like, I thought I've already finished. Like, but empathy and I would say a little less regret, but a little bit of regret in there, and like empathy kind of like carries with you for forever, really.
I mean, he definitely has a lot of guilt. You know?
Yeah, that's
you can
true.
see it on his face. But it's like he learns poetry and then he starts to go crazy.
Yeah.
So go figure.
That's the best. That's the best ending scene, and I think we have a pretty similar explanation and thoughts on the last scene. And great last scene. Love.
Yeah.
And I just love getting ear blasted. If you've watched this far and you haven't watched the film, you're getting a warning, which is good for you. But right when the credits go, bro, it just goes up like 10 volumes, man.
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely shitty YouTube quality level, you know. But yeah, as far as closing thoughts go, I have to sneeze. And that's what I think of this movie. What do you think about it?
I think that was hilarious timing and a perfect way to end. Well, we have to actually talk about our ratings, but
yeah, we
that
gotta
was
give our ratings.
I talked about everything, so I'm good with my ending thoughts as well.
Well, I would give it a lion turtle and a squirt.
Hey, it got up from the last.
Nope, that was
Really?
the same review as last time.
Oh man, I forgot about the squirt last time.
No,
Dang
I
it.
gave it a squirt.
Okay.
Yeah, I think yeah, I
Well,
don't
the
know
world
how
will
well
never
it's
know.
going to change, but yeah, I mean, it's got so much. It's like the writing is brilliant, the directing is great, and although it is a little slow, I have to sneeze again. You know, it's like, whatever. It's good. I like it.
And I echo that. I love this film. I feel like his trilogy, and whenever we get to his other films, they are made for me because I just love this bits of ambiguity where I can kind of expand on the characters in my head, but also commentary and surrealism and hilarious jokes and weird humor, and I'm gonna give it an oogway out of 10, same as last time.
Well, shit. We had the same ones as last time. Well, all right. Well, if you like this, if you got this far, I mean, you should give a like because, like, not very many people make it this far. You know what I mean?
Almost nobody.
Very few people. I don't know if anyone makes it to the end of these. So
Yeah,
if you do, like, hey, let us know in the comments. And
Yeah.
we'll be like, we'll worship you, dude. We'll be like, dude, you watched the whole thing? That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll give you a noodle or a worm or something.
Yeah, we'll give you a worm. Like straight out the box, like fishing bait. So yeah.
Yeah, that's all right from us. All right, bye.